And so here we are. Yeah, okay. Then Arthur, do you want to take over the introduction this time?
Yeah, hey, hello all together to the next meetup of the Berlin Power BI user group, today with Mathias Thierbach. Matthias, maybe he's already known to some of you because of his Power BI tools. He's someone who's really into professional development, and I think I will leave the rest to Matthias because he can introduce it so much better.
And chat is open for questions, so yeah. Okay, Matthias.
Okay, awesome. Thanks very much. Absolutely. Thanks for having me. A great pleasure. A bit unusual as well, doing a chat in English on a Berlin user group, but I understand you've got a very international audience now. And to be honest, I'm sort of more comfortable speaking English anyways, having lived in Britain for over 13 years now. So can people see my screen already, or
yes?
Okay,
we see the title.
Oh, very good. Yeah. All right. I want to talk about pbi-tools, which is an open source project I own and run, and specifically talk about pbi-tools helping with deployments. So before I get started with that, let me introduce myself. Next slide. I am based in London, although I'm German originally. I'm currently head of finance systems for YouGov, a London-based market research and data analytics company. I've been with YouGov for almost 15 years now. And I've had a pretty varied career up to now. Started off as a software developer, software engineer, software architect, and ended up in the BI space about 7 or 8 years ago. But all in all, I've always worked with Microsoft technologies, .NET specifically, and pbi-tools, which I want to talk about today, started off quite a while ago, actually going back to 2016, but didn't become open source until October last year. So it's sort of been cooking in private and just for me personally for quite a while. If you want to follow me, Twitter is definitely my preferred place. That's where I tend to make announcements and talk about new stuff. LinkedIn, if you're sort of more on a professional side. And in terms of what I want to cover today, first of all, introduce pbi-tools. So I'm assuming that it's not known to everyone. Want to give a general introduction. What does it do? And why did I start it? I'm going to do some demos. Want you to go away with you know, a better understanding of what it looks and feels like, and then obviously talk about deployment pipelines, both for Azure DevOps as well as GitHub Actions. I'm more than happy to take questions at any point in between. And I'm not necessarily able to follow the chat all the time, but I think Christoph and Arthur are going to help here. So what is pbi-tools and why does it exist? I put a few thoughts in here. Basically, I had this vision what it would be like if you worked on a Power BI project and were actually able to see in a very great detail what changes in your project, in your PBX file, when you make changes to a report, to a model, and basically open up this black box and figure out what's inside. And ultimately then use that for automation, deployment, other kinds of things that are able at the source code level. As you probably well know, this is not something Microsoft supports or offers in terms of tooling, which is a massive gap in the Power BI ecosystem. But I wasn't happy with that. And so, as I said, sort of back in 2016, I started looking around, well, what can I do, sort of, hacking into those PBIX files. And that's basically how pbi-tools started. It effectively gives us a notion of a project containing source code as opposed to a single file that's just a black box, and allows professional development workflows using source control systems like Git, using branching models and automation for the entire life cycle. It works for thin reports as well as models. And let me just show you what it looks like. So if I go here, this is a sort of a little bit of a visual representation. Just to give an overview, if you look at this from left to right, we basically start off doing local development, one person at their local workstation with Power BI Desktop, where we've got a PBIX file, essentially, where we use tools like Power BI Desktop, I mentioned already, but also Tabular Editor, DAX Studio. And for most people, and for the vast majority of people, this is basically where it ends. You can't go any further there, right? What pbi-tools now gives you, and maybe I should come in here as well. Oops. So what pbi-tools now gives you is a command called extract, which basically allows you to go one step further. And that allows to take apart everything in a PBIX file, put it into a folder structure. I call that structure pbi-procs, pbix proj format. And this is something you can put into a source control system like Git. So now we can actually use tools like GitHub, Azure, DevOps, GitLab, and VS Code to engage with those source files. And we can then go one step further. So just going back here. We can then go one step further and recompile those sources back into a PBIX file to deploy it into Power BI service, for instance, or to actually continue work on someone else's changes in someone else's branch locally. And pbi-tools allows all of that. Extract and compile are two example commands, which we're going to see in a second. It's an open source project available on GitHub. pbi.tools is the corresponding website. And it's currently just a command line tool, which is basically why I use the sort of command line shell image down here. I'm very keen and I'm working on making this a proper external tool with a graphical user interface, something which is much more accessible to most people. So stay tuned. That's a lot of work, and it's coming. Just got to get there, if that's okay. And a basic workflow, which I'm going to demonstrate in a second, looks like this. You open an existing PBIX file in Power BI Desktop. You start pbi-tools in watch mode, we're going to see what that means, which basically looks for changes happening in our PBX file whenever someone clicks the save button. Those will be extracted and are visible to us as diffs, assuming that we have our project in source control already, which means we can make small incremental changes. We can commit those into our repository, and ultimately we can actually push them up to a CI/CD server where a pipeline would kick off and deploy the whole thing into a Power BI workspace. So let me switch to, I've got too many windows open here. Let me switch here and here. There we go. So I've got a report already loaded. Most importantly, because Power BI Desktop takes ages to start, as everyone knows. It's not a super fancy report. It doesn't really matter. It's good enough for the demo here. And we can also see I've got VS Code open in the background. And this one actually is a folder which contains a project for that particular report. We can see report.pbx, that's the file I've got open currently, and then we can see a few other files as well. Most importantly, we can see this report subfolder, and that one is actually what pbi-tools has given us. It has extracted all the metadata, all the definitions which describe my PBIX file, and has made them accessible to me. Specifically here, the report subfolder is basically my report layout. So all the visual elements are contained in here. When I go here, I can see all sorts of JSON. And for instance, I can see this subfolder representing a particular page. Sales by month happens to be the first page in my report. It's got this index of 0 here. If I switch back to Power BI Desktop, we can see sales by month. If we now take a look, how many visuals can we actually see on that report? There are 2 slicers, there's 1 matrix, and then there's a text box here. If I go to sales by month and go into the visual container subfolders, I can actually see 4 subfolders, right? 1 text box, 2 slicers, 1 pivot table, which is the technical name for matrix. That's basically what we're getting. This format is not something I've invented. This is basically what PBIX files use internally to describe the report. What I've done is to sort of pull it out, but then also expanded it into a folder structure so that we can actually reason about it and actually understand the internal structure here. I talked about watch mode earlier. Let me do that. Again, pbi-tools currently is just a command line tool, so there's a bit of typing involved, but things will get way better once we have a graphical interface for this. So what I'm going to do for now is I'm going to run pbi-tools info because I want to have information about my currently open Power BI Desktop session. Specifically, I want to have this process ID. Because with that, I can go and say pbi-tools extract PID -watch. And so this is now connecting to that particular Power BI Desktop session. And every time I press save, it will go and extract the definition of my report And because the report is already under source control, I will actually get a diff view to see what I've changed. So for instance, let me change this background color. If you've seen other of my recordings, I keep making the same kind of changes. So I'm sorry if that's too boring, but here we go. So let's just make one single change. I click save and pay attention what happens at the bottom of my screen. Stuff is now kicking off automatically. So basically pbi-tools discovered that the file was changed, and I can now go in here, and there we go. I've got 3 files which have had an update, and this is the one which actually has my background color change. We can see this is a config file which resides at the page level of my first page. We're looking at the background object, and specifically we're looking at the color of my background, which has changed from color ID 4 to color ID 2. Those are theme colors. So that's basically a numeric index referencing my current Power BI theme. Other things in here are irrelevant as far as that particular change was concerned. This one, for instance, just shows that the 22.3 March version of Power BI Desktop saved that file. The previous copy I had open was saved with the February release, so this is why that's happening here. And this one only contains a last modified timestamp, which we can actually ignore here as well. So my workflow would now be to stage this particular color change, and then to go in here and say changed background color. There we go. So I can commit that. It's now in my history, in my Git commit history, and I can keep going, make other changes, or I can just stop editing this particular file. When I do that, look here, the session, the pbi-tools session will end automatically. It basically detects that too, and will simply stop watching. Now, we can see, looking at the sources here, those 2 files I haven't committed yet. Let's just put those in here, even though they're actually irrelevant. Let's just call them other changes, like so. So that way we get a clean working folder again. And I can now push my changes up. So this repository is already linked to a project in Azure DevOps. Why don't we have a look at that? Just need to get to the right. So I think it's this one. Yes. I created a dedicated Power BI workspace for this session, called it Berlin User Group Demo Dev. We can see there's a report in here linked to a separate data set, which also resides in a separate workspace. That report is the one I was editing earlier. We recognize the very ugly pink background color, and what I have got in place is this particular repo in Azure DevOps. In fact, yeah, that's the one. So the project and the folder we were looking at in VS Code on my machine earlier is actually linked to this repo in Azure DevOps. And that one defines a pipeline. The pipeline is kicking off whenever new changes get pushed, and it will basically recompile the sources back into a PBX file and then push those into this particular workspace. So let's just see what that looks like, and then I'll explain how that's all happening. So just syncing the two commits up to Azure DevOps. There we go. So that's all done. If I then go back here, and if I go to pipelines, I can see this one. There is a new pipeline queue. So this is all happening fully automated, and it's all triggered just by me actually having pushed those changes up there. This is currently running. When I click on the little spinner, I can see there's all sorts of stuff going on here. At the end of the day, I'm interested in this particular step succeeding, pbi-tools deploy. So just got to give Azure a little bit of time to get there. In fact, sometimes the screen doesn't actually update. So sometimes when you, there we go. This was so fast, the screen isn't actually able to even update. So the whole thing took 25 seconds. Yeah, we would have been sitting here and waited for quite a long time. So basically, those are all the steps which were just executed as part of my deployment. Only this one is actually the one that does some real work. Everything else is just Azure DevOps stuff that always happens. And when we go in here, we can see that a report.pbix was generated from my sources. It then resolved the workspace GUID from my workspace name, and then it ended up deploying it. Conveniently, I also get my report URL in here, so I can actually go into those logs, and I can literally click on this to jump straight into my report, and then we'll see it's now blue rather than pink or whatever it was before. So this is the whole pipeline end to end. I mean, if I go here and restart, refresh, you'll see that's the same one. I'm not. There we go. So I'm not tricking. So how does this all work? Let's go back here. Let me close this and that one as well. So we've already looked into the report subfolder containing report layout information and various other files. So we sort of understand what's going on here. In addition to that, we've got a pbi-tools settings file. And that one contains a deployment manifest underneath the deployments node here, which basically allows me to declare, almost as in code, if you will, what my deployment is meant to do. So I'm saying perform a report deployment, basically. Publish a PBX file into Power BI Workspace. That's what report deployment means. Find the sources for the report in folders using this particular search pattern. So basically any folder in the root of my repository. Authenticate using a service principal, which has this particular client ID, and where the secret is coming from an environment variable, because we need to keep that safe. Create a new report or overwriting existing one whenever there's a matching name. And for the development environment, deploy everything into the workspace with this particular name. So this is what pbi-tools gives us in terms of defining the type and details of the deployment. And Azure DevOps then picks this up using an Azure pipeline YAML file. That's how deployment or any sort of pipelines are defined. And as you can see, there isn't very much going on here. It's pretty simple. First of all, we are saying trigger this pipeline whenever something changes on the main branch. Set a few variables, and then it basically defines a single deployment job. So this is the type of job here with a name deploy, then a display name deploy to environment. Take a Ubuntu host from the Azure DevOps pool and use this particular container. So that's very new. This pbi-tools core container was released as the latest pbi-tools release about 3 weeks ago, and actually makes definition of those pipelines substantially easier than it would have been otherwise. This is a Docker container which is publicly available, hosted on GitHub, and it's literally as simple as putting this particular line in here in order to have pbi-tools pre-installed in your Azure DevOps runner. We're then specifying the environment we're deploying into. We're saying to check out the source code from the repo, and then at the end of it, there's literally one command we're running, which is pbi-tools core deploy, which will ultimately perform the deployment according to this manifest. That one, so I just need a bit of water. Do we have any questions in the meantime?
No questions so far.
Okay,
no.
All right. And that one scales very nicely. So I can actually go, just need to find my Explorer window. Right, so here we go. This is Azure here, that's the one. If I literally clone this file, so copy, paste, and just call that report 2. Here we go, like so. And if I now go in here and extract that folder, that file into a folder as well. And remember, I was talking about pbi-tools extract and compile earlier. So pbi-tools extract report 2. That one basically reads what's in the report and creates this new subfolder. So if I don't want to do this in watch mode, whilst I'm making changes, if I just want to do it as a one-off, and this is how I get there. So if I now go and basically commit this new folder and git commit added report 2. Here we go. And then sync my changes, which basically means this commit will be pushed up to Azure DevOps. I guess you can already assume what's going to happen. The change will arrive here. It will kick off a new pipeline. And it will then find that we've got 2 subfolders, report and report 2. It will compile both of those into a PBX file and will then deploy both of those into the workspace. And let's just make sure, here we go. So it's been kicked off. We're normally just talking seconds here, unless there's any sort of problem with the Azure infrastructure. Just gonna, it's currently initializing, so it hasn't made it to the crucial stage yet. I'm a little impatient. It's those long moments, everyone. All right, let's just give it a little bit of time. We were very lucky first time around when it basically just completed super fast. The thing is, this is all using shared resources, right? So there, I don't have any dedicated runners here. I don't have any reserved capacity in terms of what Azure gives me. If I paid them lots of money, obviously I would be getting that. Or if I created my own runners for this, it's just a little stuck right now. Let's just be patient here. Once we get here, it's all gonna happen very quickly. Any questions whilst we wait?
No questions so far in the chat. Just shared also the links in the chat for everyone to check. And maybe if you want to, test it out yourself also. Not in parallel while talking, but maybe a few steps here and there.
So maybe we could share this link actually. Because I created this as a public project, I think I did. Yes, it's public. So anyone can, I'm just going to paste it into the chat and anyone can check this out. And so let's see how our pipeline is doing. Good. So we're good now. It's just needed a little longer to initialize. So we can see this bit took 2 minutes 30. It could easily just have taken 5 seconds. So yeah, totally at the mercy of Azure here. But the crucial thing, the actual deployment took 4 seconds, right? So let's have a look in here because obviously something is different because now we're actually deploying 2 reports. So we've got report 2 and we've got report. And again, we've got those links generated, which means I can go in here and I can see report 2 exists here. And when I go into workspace view, then I've got both reports showing up as thin reports linked to the same data set. So that's basically an end-to-end demo in terms of making local changes, extracting the changes, looking at the diffs, committing it into an existing repo, and then seeing how the pipeline is picking up the changes and deploying them into Power BI. There is a variation of that, which I also wanted to talk about. It's always good giving people options, because full disclosure, the recompilation of those sources back into PBX file, that's not officially supported by Microsoft, right? So just putting it out here, this is not something which Microsoft has ever documented or which they would officially endorse. The community is pushing extremely hard for this to happen, and there are lots of noises coming out of Microsoft right now that this apparently is something they want to support moving forward, but we're not there yet, right? So just full disclosure, that if you talk to anyone at Microsoft about this, they will be very cautious and will definitely wave the not supported flag. Nonetheless, they're not giving us any alternatives, and I would argue we have a very strong need to actually have this kind of visibility, right? So, but nonetheless, if you were a bit cautious in terms of putting this into your production environment, I've got an alternative for you, which is well, you have to give up, you know, all the nice things in terms of being able to see those sources, but you can actually still use the deployment capabilities. I created another project which has basically the exact same setup, but what's different here is that I'm not extracting my PBX file. Instead, I'm actually committing my PBX file as a whole, and then I'm letting pbi-tools take care of the deployment. And that is fully supported, right? This is only using documented, fully supported public APIs. In fact, I'm actually planning on doing a post on the pbi-tools website where I'm going to do a side-by-side comparison of what's supported, what isn't, just for full transparency here. So this one also has my report.pbix, but it has two minor differences, or three. So first of all, there is no report subfolder, so I can't see what's inside. Secondly, my deployment manifest, let me just bring this up. My deployment manifest here, that's the crucial difference, uses file as the type instead of folder, right? And then it also has a pattern which finds me a file rather than a folder name. And so that's different. And then the other thing is, I configured a Git add-on called gitlfs, which is large file support, which basically allows me to sort of abuse Git a little bit, right? So, I mean, Git as a source control system is meant to be used with text-based files. It's meant to be used with files where you would track changes on a line-by-line basis, right? Obviously, that is not possible with a pbx file because that's not a text file. That's just a massive binary blob. So if you were to push those kinds of files into a Git repo, you're sort of working against what it was designed for, and it doesn't perform very well. And it certainly doesn't scale very well. For that reason, gitlfs was developed, which allows you to still commit those kinds of files, but they are actually stored in a separate blob storage. I've got a whole slide on the slide deck later on where I'm explaining how it's all working. Just take my word for it. For now, this is basically using gitlfs. And other than that, it's all the same. And if I let me make a change here. We're just gonna have to bite the bullet now and wait for Power BI Desktop to open. And we can see that this works just as well. And the only difference, once again, is we're not going to see what's changed. Right, 1 second. Open report. Berlin, Azure. LFS. That's my report. Here we go. And I'm going to do a different change now. I'm going to actually let me rename the page. Here we go. So I'm just going to rename that sales by month. Rename's a really silly change, I admit, but at least we'll see it. Okay, so if I now go and save, because this pbx file is in source control, it's going to change color now. It's now showing up as yellow because it's had a change. So I can go and say renamed page mid and push, and that one is also set up as an Azure pipeline already. We've in fact, the pipeline definition is exactly the same. The only difference is, in fact, this is gonna fail. But okay, yeah, I needed to rename that because the profile. Oh no, sorry, it's all good. So if we go here, go back into pipelines, we can see that the Azure LFS pipeline is running. That's actually what the repo is called. It's doing exactly the same thing. The only difference is because the PBX file is already here, it doesn't have to recompile it. So hence it doesn't do anything unsupported, right? It literally just uses the existing deployment APIs. Whilst that is again taking a little, oh no, here we go, all done. So basically looking here, so this looks a little different because this time the report.pbx file didn't have to be reproduced. So it was already there and it was basically available straight away. If I go back here, that's the same file, right? This is report. If I refresh that, we will expect my page name to be different, and we will obviously also expect the background color to be back to the original. And voila. There we go. Cool. Background color, and this has been renamed. So those are two different options. And again, you choose based on sort of how much risk you're happy to take. Obviously, we all hope that at some point in the future, Microsoft will be more supportive. And everyone, please do lobby, Microsoft to help us get there. One hybrid approach I would also I want to show is this one. So basically, we've got the repo with the PBX file included, right? And again, this is to ensure that we don't use or we don't have to rely on unsupported features. But what we can do, we can actually get the best of both worlds. So in addition to committing the PBX file itself, I can still go in here and actually do my extract. And because there's nothing wrong with that, right? And Microsoft would never have an issue with that. We're literally just looking at what's inside the file. And so that way I can actually keep those extracted sources inside my repo, which means I still have visibility into what's changed. So I've got the change control bit sorted out. But without actually relying on those sources for deployment. The deployment will actually just use this file, right? So, oh gosh, for some reason, my laptop isn't charging at the moment. This is very silly. So fingers crossed that I'm not suddenly gonna drop off. So that's something I can do, and I can basically commit git add. I can commit those sources without doing anything with them in terms of deployment, but still have them there for visibility. And that's an option I think is a pretty good hybrid. Cool. So added pbix proj folder. Okay. There we go. All right. So that's pretty much showing us end to end how what things look like in Azure in terms of extract, commit, push, compile, deploy. I've got, I can show the exact equivalence for GitHub. But if there were any questions in the meantime, we could also go to those first.
No questions so far, so we can go to the GitHub. But
okay.
In case there are questions coming, then we will jump in or cover it afterwards in the Q&A.
All right, no problem. So let's switch over to GitHub. It's all pretty straightforward because there are lots of similarities. Let's start off in the same order. So I basically did the same thing. I created 2 different repos side by side, one which only contains sources and then the other one which contains the file. What's really important to note is that the pbi-tools deployment manifest is exactly the same, but that one has no dependency on whether we're in GitHub or Azure or anywhere else, right? So this is completely agnostic. The only thing which is different here is that GitHub uses a slightly different YAML file. So I was switching over to GitHub and was basically, just need to find the right window here. Here, there it is. So let me pull this over. And was basically saying it's essentially exactly the same. So here we go. So, okay. So this is a repo I created earlier. It's also public, so we can, in fact, let me put the link in here. And that one does exactly the same thing. We've got the same deployment manifest here. We've got in this repo, we've got the report extracted. And then we've got our GitHub workflow defined. We looked at this very briefly. That's our workflow. It has a name. It has a trigger, which in this case works on the main branch. Few variables. You see, this is virtually a side-by-side clone of what we were doing in Azure earlier. We're also specifying Ubuntu, we're specifying the environment we're deploying into, we're specifying the exact same container, we're saying to check out, and then we're using pbi-tools core deploy, right? So just slightly different syntax, everything else is exactly the same. When I now go and did I already push my changes? I can't remember now. I think I must have, because otherwise that would show up as a change here. So if I now go and go into that repo and go to actions, no, I haven't. I must not have pushed it yet. I think this is when everything died. Am I in the right GitHub? pbitools, put it in pbitools. Let's have a look here. No, maybe it was in the process of pushing, and then this is when the machine switched off. I'm sorry. Let's just make another change here. In fact, let me just grab another file and basically produce a change that way. So, good. Tutorials, Berlin. This is where I should have my second file. There we go. Copy. And then if we go to GitHub here, paste that in there and go to the repo. I've got a second file showing up here, so I can go and extract that pbi-tools extract report 2, which gives me the subfolder. We've seen that before. I can then do git add and git commit added report 2. Here we go. So now I've got a change, and it allows me to sync those changes up to GitHub. What's happening? We can see that down here. If I now go in here, there should be, yes, okay. So I've got my second commit showing up, and I can also see here that an action is actually running, and this was triggered by this added report to commit, right? If I click on this, I can see, well, it was too fast again. So same principle really, right? This is my workflow. There's one job running inside the workflow. It's called deployment. When I click on it, I'm going to get access to all the steps which happened inside. There's lots of GitHub specific stuff going on here, but most importantly, I've actually got this pbi-tools deploy, which in this particular case created 2 reports from sources and deployed them. So going back into my tenant, I can see there are 2 reports, and if I go back to this one, it now has the original page name because this is not the file where I actually changed the page name. Yeah, that's there isn't really much else to be said, to be honest, because there are too many similarities here. Let me just point out one thing, which is secrets management. So we've already seen we're using a service principal to authenticate, right? I've set this up in my Azure tenant, and then also gave that permissions inside Power BI. And I'm basically saying that this variable, this environment variable, contains my secret. So where does it actually come from? Inside GitHub, I'm specifying that this particular step, the step which runs pbi-tools deploy, has an environment variable with this name. So that's precisely what pbi-tools is looking for. And it's coming from this expression. It's basically coming from a GitHub secret, which happens to have the same name, but it could easily have another name. When we go into that repo in GitHub, and if we go to settings, we can see there are secrets and action secrets, and this is where I've defined it, right? So that's basically how all links together, and that's how the deployment script can ultimately access the credentials. The equivalent in Azure is defined at the pipeline level. So if I go to either one of those, if I go to this one, I can go to edit and click on variables, and then I can see here I've got PBI client secret set up as a secret, so the value itself isn't actually shown. With the syntax here, which again has a lot of similarities to what GitHub does, I'm injecting that secret into my script step by basically saying the step has a variable with that name, and it's actually coming from the outside. It's coming from the pipeline level variable. So there unfortunately, there are two levels of indirection necessary here, but this is what both Azure and GitHub require. That's probably the only thing that wasn't immediately clear. Everything else is, everything else we've talked about already, I think. Any further questions? Anything interesting in the chat?
There was one, not a question, but one comment from UV or regarding backups or maybe also version history related. So came across on Reddit that when you publish reports using OneDrive, the data refreshes from the Power BI service gets committed back to the local folder. So you always have the latest data on your local copy as well, thanks to OneDrive. And then potentially also a version history, because OneDrive also has that. I mean, it's not the same as pbi-tools, but I never tried it, so I would have to try that out. But it definitely sounds like a nice feature.
I'm just trying to find the comment. I can't see it in the chat, so maybe
I think you have been.
Maybe I don't have the full chat history.
But
sorry, it was
I
it was
can
why
paste
you
it again here.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I think it's about to getting the data back to your source files. If you
maybe also UV, if you find the Reddit link, also you can maybe you still have it or so, you can maybe post it.
Okay.
Definitely sounds like a nice side thing.
Obviously, there are various benefits you're getting from source control, right? Version history being one, right? The ability to actually collaborate in a team context where you're able to merge changes from different people into the same project is another one, right? So that is definitely not something possible when you're working just on files. That's only possible when you're working on folder structures. And being able to choose any CI/CD tool, right? Be it GitHub or Azure DevOps or GitLab or whatever it happens to be the system of choice in your environment is what we're targeting here as well, right? Again, pbi-tools provides the logic, if you will, but where it runs is completely irrelevant. When we talk about, so just coming back to the OneDrive point, when we're talking about data here, then this is probably also referencing a thick report, right? Where you basically have a model and a report combined in the same file, which is not quite the scenario I'm targeting here or I'm interested in, right? So this is looking at a scenario where you've got thin reports linked to centrally curated data sets, which is much more common, in an enterprise context, obviously. I've also focused on report changes and visual changes in particular, because when it comes to data sets and model development, we already have Tabular Editor, right? I say that every time. Tabular Editor is leading the way here in terms of providing professional source control features for models. So that's not something I have any intention of replicating or competing with. It's what I want to provide is similar capabilities for reports, for visual definitions inside Power BI.
Yeah, no, it's definitely also a different use case, of course. Totally agree there. Yeah. So, if there are questions, chat, let them come. Maybe one question from my side. You mentioned or maybe just an outlook also. What else you plan for pbi-tools in the next months? Maybe what you're currently working on, and also you mentioned this user interface or something.
Yes.
Instead of the command line tool, do you already have like a timeline here, or I think that's also maybe interesting for people who want to try it out.
Yes, good point. So I'll make that slide deck available afterwards. So let me just go through here quickly. I'll put a few notes here around the key pbi-tools commands we've looked at: extract, compile, deploy. There's some few notes here around the deployment manifest, which we've seen 2 different versions of so far. This one is talking about the folder structure and what it gives us in terms of visibility. Roadmap is what I've got here, since you talked about that, right? So documentation is always something you can do more of and can get better at, right? Arguably, I don't have a whole lot of documentation, although by now we actually have quite a few recordings on YouTube. Just earlier today, I actually published a new YouTube playlist, which combines the various presentations I've provided. So do check that one out. The other thing, so everything that's marked in bold here is basically high priority right now. So as far as deployments are concerned, I've only shown report deployments today. What I'm working on immediately, so that's the very next thing coming, is dataset deployment. Basically allowing to use the exact same deployment manifest and the exact same approach, which lets you lift and shift between completely different CI/CD systems for models. External tool, we've talked about already. I'm aiming to have a first version of that in place by the end of May. So basically 2 months from now, fingers crossed, I can keep that promise. What's then coming beyond external tool and dataset deployments is much more work and much more intelligence around report sources, right? So this is really why I want to put the key focus moving forward. Once all the basics are in place, I want to allow effectively scripting of reports, right? So basically now, if I just go back to the source control view, now that we've got this view and now that we have a way of getting familiar with what the report layout and the visuals look at the source code level, I want to be able to take advantage of that and allow to script transformations, for instance, right? So that you can set filters or slicers or titles automatically using a script from the outside, even run as part of a deployment, right? Or ultimately, I want to be able to actually allow building those sources from scratch, right? Using a scripted approach rather than actually having to do it all by hand in Power BI Desktop. So that could be very interesting, particularly in an enterprise context, where you want to be where you've got a templated approach, where you want to be highly consistent and where you want to be able to scale, right? So basically push out loads of reports, but without creating lots and lots of manual work to get there. So that's sort of the ultimate vision. And in theory, that's all possible because, again, we've got the source code here. We understand more or less what's happening in there, and we can recompile. We can, we've just seen that. We can go back from source code all the way into Power BI service. What I'm trying to figure out is what sort of scripting tools I need to provide around that to actually make that accessible to a wider audience. And I've got some links here, including all the public repos we've looked at, both in Azure as well as GitHub. And I mentioned gitlfs earlier. Got some links in here, including a really good tutorial at the bottom. So if you do intend to actually commit PBX files into Git, definitely check out gitlfs. It's you're gonna benefit from this down the line. That's all I wanted to cover, but absolutely more than happy to do more questions.
Yeah, just also the Arthur posted the
Oh yeah,
or a
awesome.
YouTube
Thanks very much.
playlist, and maybe also if you have any other playlist or
your playlist
have here
is
all the
still
links.
missing.
Yeah, if you could share the
yeah.
playlist, then
I just
I would also
posted the playlist, the part which is on my channel, and for anyone who wants to keep the pace with your release pace, he can join our live talks from time to time. So about every 2 weeks we are talking live about the latest updates to the Power BI tools. So we already covered Docker, the transformation of the format from tabular editor and back, and also the watch mode was new some weeks ago. So it's developing even faster than Power BI itself. So you can also just subscribe to the Data Unity channel to keep up with this.
There's a question around themes. We can definitely cover that one. That's nice and easy. Just wanted to make one comment prior to that. So if anyone's interested specifically in the CI/CD pipeline setup, so all the stuff I've shown today, Reed Havens and I recorded a step-by-step tutorial and actually how to set those up literally from scratch. And that's coming in the next few weeks. It's already in the box, already recorded, and you'll be able to actually follow for either Azure DevOps or GitHub Actions, whatever you choose, step by step, everything that's needed to go from nothing to the fully automated pipeline. In terms of themes, we can handle that. Basically,
just for guys on YouTube, so the Power BI tools extracts the Power BI themes JSON as well to commit.
Yes, so basically that comes up in 2 places. First of all, the report, the extracted report folder has a subfolder called static resources. So that one contains all the default themes, it contains whatever base theme has been chosen, which is if you take use the magic of VS Code and do format document, you can actually convert to something which is much more readable. So there's a theme name. That one ships with Power BI Desktop automatically, right? And then we've got the various colors here, and then we've got all the definitions for all types of visuals. So that's in here. If you then select a custom theme on top of that, it will sit in here as well, side by side. So basically, custom themes always amend the base themes. You basically have both of them. And anything that's not in the custom theme will then fall back to the base theme. So this is where they're defined. When you go to your report config, you've got a theme collection property here, which then references whatever theme is in place. Again, if there's a custom theme, then that will show up as a second element down here. I just don't have that in this particular example. Which also means, right, with access to the sources, you could actually think about manipulating that or automatically injecting whatever your company theme is without having to do that manually using Power BI Desktop.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think no more questions. Otherwise,
so maybe a last question from me. Do you think about all this thing that it's the compiling is not official? Do you see any developments to change it? You already told that everyone is pushing for it, and but I can understand that it's quite hard for Microsoft because they really have to validate all the data that you can use for the compile process. So is there anything to expect? Will such tools become, will need to be certified to do this, or can you say anything about it?
I wish I could.
Okay.
Well, I mean, it's a difficult topic because some people at Microsoft at least say verbally that that's something they're working on. However, we haven't seen this on any official roadmap so far, right? So there's literally nothing official that we could rely on in terms of this kind of support coming at any point in the future. If you follow Marco Russo, for instance, on Twitter, you'll see that he is very verbose about those topics and likes to get someone to commit. But yeah, we haven't been successful enough. So I think we will probably have to live with, alternative solutions for quite a while to come.
So it still works. So I told when you were off-site here that my actual use case is still the copy-pasting of pages and visuals as a JSON and then to compile it back to Power BI desktop file. It works. And it's also interesting to maintain some standards in your environment.
I can, in terms of the whether that's supported or not, I can say that at my workplace, we've used this exact same compilation approach in production for over 3 years successfully with no issues, right? So there's definitely quite a lot of sort of actual experience in what it takes for those automation solutions to work.
Yeah, and I think for the last persons who are still here, so we already lost the majority on the way, but after the core of the talk, I can also show.
Thankfully, we only lost the speaker temporarily.
Yeah.
I'm really, really sorry about that.
It's charging now, yeah. So
yeah, I had to go and actually get a different charger, which didn't help because that wasn't even around here. So I'll always use 2 chargers from now on.
So here you can check out this channel. Already the last talk with Ben is already here. So the talk of today will be also published there as other German meetups. So then you can watch the cutted version without the break.
Director's cut.
Yeah, the director's cut of Power BI tools and development pipelines. And a little outlook. We will in 2 weeks. We will have our next meetup with even freer and planning and write back with the Power On custom visual.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, quite interesting topic. I think planning is always something people ask for. So yeah, join and follow the Berlin user group. And here is, by the way, my own channel where one playlist is about the tool talks with Matthias. And there all the tutorials are, they're just free now, but we already started. And it will be even more if you want to know about special features. Yeah, okay, that's what I had to show.
Fantastic. If you allow me one piece of promotion as well, anyone who doesn't feel very comfortable with Git concepts and source control in general, and who sort of felt, well, I need some more basics from what I've seen today. I've got you covered on the 13th of April. I hope I've got the right date. I'm going to do a session, Introduction to Git for Power BI developers. So want to make sure that more and more people can actually participate in with that sort of tooling.
Yeah.
Maybe I need to visit this too. Okay.
Yeah. So we will gather all the links. We will share them, so give us a bit of time to gather everything, and then we will share it on Meetup and also on YouTube. We will add the links there as well once the video goes live. Yeah.
Great.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Mathias. Really cool topic. Good presentation. So another great tool to discover. Then I wish everyone
see you again.
A nice evening, and see you soon somewhere in some Power BI events.
Yeah, thanks very much. Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.